Round 21 of the 2024 Formula One World Championship season saw the teams head off to Brazil for the back end of another triple header and what could end up being a definitive race in the season itself. Max Verstappen started 17th, cut through the field in what surely is one of the most impressive drives in his already sterling Formula One career. A red flag coming at the perfect moment for him after Franco Colapinto of Williams got himself into some trouble, and a restart in second, Max forcing his way through to first and going on to take his first victory in 11 Grand Prix, going back all the way to the back end of June in Spain. He finished ahead of the two Alpines, yes, Alpine, second and third, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. A fantastic performance for the Enstone team, the first time they've had a double podium since 2013. Well, before we have a look at the news and discuss the Grand Prix itself, let's have a quick look at the result from Interlagos. Well, it was Max Verstappen that finished some 19 seconds ahead of Ocon and Pierre Gasly, the two Alpine drivers scoring some great whopping points for the team. George Russell, Mercedes, coming home in fourth before Charles Leclerc in fifth for the first of the Ferraris. Norris in sixth, ending pretty much his championship hopes surely. Tsunoda in seventh, Piastri 8th, Lawson in 9, great result for RB, and Lewis Hamilton rounding out the points in 10th place. Perez 11th, disappointing for him. Behrman, Bottas, Alonso and Guanyu, the finishers. DNFs for Sainz and Colapinto, a disqualification for Hülkenberg, and a DNS for Albon and Lance Stroll. Well, joining me to discuss the Grand Prix and some breaking news, I'm delighted to have Ben Hunt and Kevin Turner. Gents, how are you doing? First of all, Kevin, how's it going?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks very much. Yeah, we're getting. Feels like a long Formula One season, doesn't it? But we're into the closing stages now.
We are in the back end. And Ben, you've been on holiday.
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. I've had a nice little break. And
right for some.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I really enjoyed the Brazilian Grand Prix. Lots to talk about.
It was a classic.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's got a bit. I mean, when someone wins from, 17th on the grid, 15th, just want to see the two non-starters. But that doesn't take anything away from the drive, obviously. But yeah, when you've got as many things as happened in that race and a great drive from a great driver in the wet, then obviously it's going to go down as a classic. I guess we'll get on to talking about how classic maybe a bit later on. But yeah, it's got to be one of the defining moments of the season, isn't it?
Yeah, it had something for everybody, including Stroll doing what Stroll does.
What can I say?
Exactly. We'll come to that in just a bit. Now, gents, before we talk about the Grand Prix itself, some breaking news that came out this morning. That's Zhou, Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas are going to both be leaving Sauber at the end of this season. And the current championship leader in Formula 2, Gabriel Bortoleto, is going to be taking his place or their place alongside Nico Hülkenberg. Now, before we talk about Bortoleto, let's find out who he is. So, Kevin, what can you tell us about him?
Well, he's the reigning Formula 3 champion and leading Formula 2, like you say. So we've seen that kind of path, haven't we, from the really top drivers before, Piastri being the most recent one. I think we'd all agree that he's done a pretty reasonable job in F1 so far. So I'll be honest, I thought coming into this year, F2, I didn't think it would be a classic season. But actually, if you look at the job that Colapinto's done, jumping at Williams, what Behrman's done at Ferrari and Haas, you think actually the guy that's leading the championship probably does deserve a shot. I feel a little bit sorry for Bottas because I think he still had a little bit to give. I think he quite dominated that team this season, so I think it's a shame to lose him from F1, but I certainly think that it's a good addition to the grid.
Bortoleto has only won twice this season in Formula 2, twice in Formula 3 when he won the title as well. But he's been really consistent, hasn't he, across the board? So what can he bring to that team alongside Hülkenberg?
Well, yes, he has, and he's in a struggling team. He's not in one of the leading F2 teams. So that's pretty encouraging. I think, you mentioned the word consistency, and that's exactly what that's exactly what Audi need, or Sauber, whichever we're going to call them next year. That's exactly what they need, just consistency, and it's quite nice. You've got the experienced campaigner in Hülkenberg at 37, and then you've got Bortoleto, who's obviously 20, young, exciting prospect, and of course, ultimately, there's nowhere for him to go. If he wins the title this year in F2, he can't stay in that championship. He's got to go somewhere. So, unfortunately, that's the rules. But it looks like a good opportunity for him. And I'm excited to see how well he's going to do.
It's quite an exciting strategy, I think, for Audi and Sauber as well, because it would have been, given they're coming into it, you'd think, well, the safest option would have been Bottas and Hülkenberg, surely, is the two experienced hands. And Bottas is an established race winner, has worked with Mercedes in a top team, so that would almost be the safer option. So I think it's quite interesting that they've gone for, obviously they're going to rely on Hülkenberg to do the kind of what should we be doing, where are we going sort of thing, but to getting to a young talent in the other car, I think that's quite a good sign for the future.
Yeah. I think so too, and I've been really disappointed with Sauber this year. When we went to the livery launch at the start of the year, it was all very bold, and the message coming out was, look, we're going to have fun. We know that there's a big transition coming. We're going to be serious, but we're going to have fun. And there's been no fun there. It's just been boring every single week.
Bottas has had some fun away from the track.
Bottas is enjoying himself.
Bottas has done the best of times, isn't he, really? I mean,
but that team is in a mess, and I think that this is a clean slate. You're getting rid of everything, all the drivers, the managers, and everything else behind the scenes, and you can start shaping your future. And I think that's a really important step for Audi to make at this stage.
Before we continue this, a quick question for our listeners or our viewers here. With no Bottas on the grid, it'd be the first time there's no Finnish driver in a starting lineup in Formula One since when? I'll give you the answer when we finish this bit here. But let's just talk about having rookies in the championship. 4 rookies now lined up for 2025 with this new announcement. That's exciting in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think it's funny though, isn't it? F1 goes in cycles. For a while, they get obsessed with veterans, old hands, and the sort of average age of the drivers creeps up, and then suddenly something happens. And it's like you get a wave of the younger drivers coming, and I suppose Antonelli in a way is at the forefront of that. Mercedes was absolutely paranoid about losing out on that talent like they did with Max Verstappen, so it kind of almost triggered that. And then Ollie Behrman did a good job with Ferrari, and it's almost given extra credibility to those the championship underneath it, which it perhaps didn't have beforehand.
It's also at a time when new regulations are coming in, so it's not so crucial to have perhaps that experienced campaigner, because things are all going to change in 26 anyway. So it's good to get one of these young drivers to get some experience under their belts in preparation for 26 and hope that you hit the ground running.
What would the pressure be like for Bortoleto coming in comparative to other rookies that are going to be in the championship? Because he's at Sauber still, so is it less pressure because of their expectations?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I think Bortoleto, he's in quite a good situation. Okay, he's going to do a lot of running at the back, but when he beats Hulkenberg, everyone's going to go, oh, blimey, he's beating Hulkenberg. And if he doesn't, he'll be like, oh, well, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So I think that whereas Antonelli's going to be, in theory, if Mercedes have a quick car, he's going to be right near the front. He's going to be compared with George Russell. I know Toto Wolff has talked about, oh, well, we're going to give him time, because he has come into F1 too soon, I think. But if they say, well, look, you can bin as many cars, I mean, not quite, because obviously there's the cost cap, but if he'll put up with that sort of Monza type moment where you go out, bang, do a lap, but then crash, he's going to need time to do that in the public eye. So there's going to be more pressure on someone like him than Bortoleto. I suppose Colapinto may be somewhere, if he gets to see it, will be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it's just about keeping it clean, really, and just using those first sort of 5 or 6 races just to get familiar. Don't do anything silly, and then the rest of the season will be fine, I'm sure.
We've got some fan questions coming up in just a bit, and you mentioned there Colapinto, and that might come back a little bit later on there, so just plant that seed, because I've mentioned 4 rookies in 2024. Could be 5, could it? Don't answer that, just bear it in the back of your brain, we will come to it. I mentioned that question, that the last time no Finnish driver has started on the grid in Formula One goes back to 1988. That is a long time.
I mean, that's an amazing, such a small country as well, isn't it? Their bang for buck is pretty impressive.
It very much is. So let's move on to the Grand Prix itself, shall we? Because we mentioned it kind of has all the hallmarks of a classic. Certainly had that. It was an interesting watch for many reasons. The rain tends to do that, especially when it comes down in such amounts, doesn't it, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the rain is one thing, but I sit there and get a little bit frustrated as well at the lack of action and just watching the rain fall, and the argument about these being the best drivers in the world, and the excuse that it's too wet, we can't go out, and then the tyres are no good. It becomes this negative wave. And I do get a little bit frustrated with that, because I do think that more efforts could be made to get the cars out, to clean the track, and just to keep going, even if it's all behind the safety car, until there's a position where hopefully enough water has been removed. So that does make me a little bit frustrated in the way that there was little communication from the FIAs into what's going on. That was obviously on Saturday and the delayed qualifying. But then it culminated in a fantastic Sunday, didn't it? I mean, everything rolled into one. I can't remember which driver said, but maybe this is the future, do everything in one day. That would be entertaining, wouldn't it? But no, I mean, it was a great race. So many talking points. I think that's the main thing from a journalistic point of view. Maybe it wasn't a classic in terms of ability, apart from Max, which we'll come on to. I think that there was so many talking points.
Kev, you're pulling a face there. So.
Well, only just I thought Esteban Ocon was very impressive. I think he tends to shine when it does rain. I thought the way that my one bit of disappointment about it was that I think everyone made it a little bit too easy for Verstappen when he was doing his move down the inside, and Charles Leclerc showed how to defend. It was inevitable that Verstappen was going to get past, I think, because he had that extra pace and all the rest of it. But Leclerc was the only one that forced him off. I was surprised at how easily Oscar Piastri, the only way to make the door wider was if he ripped off its hinges and thrown it away, sort of thing. That surprised me. And of course, the two drivers that had the most reason to fight Verstappen never got the chance because Lando and George were brought in and gave track position away. So it was one of those that it's definitely a great drive by Verstappen, but it doesn't quite make it into the. I did a top 10 greatest wet weather drives list. It doesn't quite make it into that level, I think, because of things that happened around the race. It's sort of circumstantial, I think.
What was your top one?
Jackie Stewart's 1968 German Grand Prix win.
I remember it well.
With Senna's Estoril 85 win and Shuey's 96 Barcelona win in the top three.
And the Button cannon didn't come in there, no?
No, there's a whole different podcast and video about Button 2011, honestly. I think there are actually 5 standout wet weather drives, because I think those three, Jim Clark at Spa in 63 and Lewis is at Silverstone in 08, I think they've been the top 5, and obviously Max has got one of those in him. That's probably the closest we've seen. That he's already the 4th most successful F1 driver in terms of wet weather wins. So there are 156 races from the 1100 and something so far that have been rain affected, and he's won 9 now, which puts him only behind Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton.
But it's good for Formula One. It's also, it shuts a few people out. I know that if you ever criticise Max, it's because you're a Lewis fan. Apparently, it's the narrative. And if you ever criticise Lewis, you're a Max fan. And that's the only way it can possibly be. You can't possibly ever criticise Max and just be a Formula One fan. You have to have an ulterior motive. But for Max to have a leveller, a great leveller in the rain, and come through and perform so well and win by 19 seconds as well, and his teammate finish 11th, that's some statement on your position in Formula One.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, I thought it was class what he did. Keep it pointing in the right direction. You mentioned Ocon as well, and I forgot to mention him. Yeah, great drive, and Gasly as well. So, I think it's that, but also the failings of the other drivers, the mistakes that we saw. We mentioned Lance Stroll. We may come on to him in a bit, but errors like that, which are just unforgivable. With someone with so much experience, whereas Max didn't really put a wheel wrong. Liam Lawson also very impressive. Someone's only done 8 races, and I thought he did quite well.
I think we've known for a long time that Verstappen is one of the great wet weather drivers. I don't think that's actually, the things that have stopped him having a big 2008 British Grand Prix style win, one is the fact that Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, people like that have been around. So, for example, everyone talks about Verstappen's 2016 Brazilian Grand Prix. Well, Hamilton won that race, and they asked Max about it afterwards, and he went, well, there's another driver doing all the right things as well. So you've got the two greats at the same time, and at that point, Lewis is in a better point in his career, better car. So it took him a while before he could get those wins. And the other point is what you alluded to, which is we don't really get long wet races, do we? They're very punctuated, so you don't get the chance to go and destroy the field by a minute because it's like, here's a safety car, here's a red flag, and I think a lot of the problem is the cars and the tyre width actually creating so much spray. It's not a grip problem so much as a visibility one, which is perhaps a subject for another day. But yeah, I think is it Max's greatest drive so far? I think it probably is. I know when Alex Cannon spoke to him, he picked out his 2021 Austin race, the US Grand Prix against Lewis in the dry, absolutely neck and neck duel, proper pressure. Those are the two that stand out, I think.
But what makes it so impressive as well is the amount of pressure on Max's shoulders going into that one. Lando was forcing the issue, starting on pole. Max needed a result, and he got everything right. I know that red flags happened when they happened, and that did come into play with Lando doing the pit stop, and then essentially Max getting a free hit with the tyres. But you still have to make it work, and you still have to perform really well. And it went back, I said at the top of this, it was 10 Grand Prix where he didn't win. 11, 12 back now, Spain. At the back end of June was the last time Max won. So the pressure was mounting. The gap in the points was coming down and down and down and down and down. You could do the calculations. If he'd have finished 8th and Lando had won, the next 3 Grand Prix have got a completely different complexion about them.
Yeah, I mean, it's about momentum, isn't it? And Lando had the momentum. Yeah. And you can categorically say that on lap 43, when Lando went straight on and Max took the lead, that was the definitive moment of that race where everything changed, including the championship momentum. Max is now in an ascendancy. He looks at the table and job done almost, isn't it? I can win it at the next race in Vegas. I think, the pressure, knowing that Lando's there, Lando's got the quickest car. Sorry, Norris has got the quickest car. Seeing all that going on, plus the frustration of the qualifying. You know, he mentioned that he wanted to rip his garage to pieces after the frustration of qualifying, but to be able to flip it around, you know, I think that shows a positive mindset within Verstappen that perhaps he wouldn't have had in the past, where he may have thrown his toys out the pram and, you know, just exploded, whereas he was able to knuckle down from 17th, 15th, whatever it is on the grid, and deliver such a performance in those conditions with everything changing in front of him is very impressive.
62 points ahead in the championship now, 3 Grand Prix to go, plus sprint races as well. But if you ignore the sprint races, that's 75 points available. We know now the pressure on Verstappen is much, much less than it was. He can go out there and the next 3 Grand Prix bag himself 8 points at a time, and there he goes, walks away with the title. So in your opinion, Kevin, does that mean the championship is over? Is Max going to do what he needs to do, and when?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought we only really had a theoretical championship fight anyway, because Lando had a long way to go. And Verstappen gave away a few points, didn't he, with a few penalties here and there, but it was never a big, sizable. You're right, Sunday was probably the opportunity for the big, sizable turnaround, which is what Lando needed to really get back in it. Yeah, it's done now. I mean, there'd have to be sort of, you know, a meteorite hit Verstappen or something, wouldn't it, for him to? Yeah, of course I think he was going to get it closed out anyway.
Yeah,
but he'll, you know, now it would be done before the finale.
Does that mean that we're looking at a dull final 3 races, or is the constructors still enough of a carrot to whet our appetite and keep us going?
Yeah, I think the constructors is really interesting to see what happens now with Red Bull, because they were so fixated on delivering that championship for Verstappen, given everything that's gone on this year. You know, getting that championship for him was almost the number one goal, rather than the constructors, which it should have been. Whereas now, with that almost secured, they're able to focus on the constructors, looking at themselves in third place behind Ferrari and McLaren. I think it probably brings home to them just how poor a season that Sergio Perez has had, and the realisation that they need a solid finish if they are going to beat those two in the championship, but I don't think they're going to get there.
I don't mind races where there's not a championship state. I think we've got a bit obsessed with it, to be honest. There used to be loads of non-championship races and people racing with it. Like, the point of a race is to win it, isn't it? So the point of a championship, in my view, should just be to see who can win the most, which that's another box that Max has ticked this year. And without should I go for that because I need the point? No, just go for it and go and win a race. I know that we like to have a championship fight and a showdown and all that. Of course, that's great and it's brilliant for clicks and mag sales and all the rest of it. But actually, I just like the race for a race's sake, and I think most of the guys on the grid do as well. Much like 2% mortgages, we've been spoilt this season with the fight coming. We've had a lot of good races this year. We have. It's been I think when we look back at the end of this season, we probably do a season review. We'll look back and go, this is, in recent history, one of the most exciting seasons we've had. But let's just park that because I don't want to preempt it. This isn't on the script, so my producer's going to go completely crazy at me. But
yes,
we touched on Lance Stroll. Just a real quick word on Lance Stroll. He's been done to death over the weekend as well from the journos out there in Brazil. The guy drove off on the formation lap and then decided to park his car in the gravel.
Yep.
Is there a place in Formula One for Lance Stroll?
Not at that team.
But at another team?
Possibly, whoever wants to take him. But I don't think that... I think the expectations of Aston Martin now are obviously inflated as a consequence of the new factory, Adrian Newey's arrival, plus other technical members. There's a whole influx of staff. So the aspirations are there to win the World Championship. All the ingredients are there, but the fallible part of the organisation is one of the drivers. And I think that ultimately that mistake, he came in and spoke about the brake failure, possible brake failure, okay, whatever. That didn't actually put him into the gravel. He did that himself. And it's an unforgivable error, in my opinion, and there's been too many of them. And I think that, for me, is the biggest issue. We spoke about consistency before with regards to Audi. You need consistency, and he's consistently poor and not delivering enough points for them to be serious challenges, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I think, because it's easy to, when someone's had a weekend like that, it's easy to sort of take pot shots, isn't it? But I think it's worth remembering, he did win stuff on the way up to F1. His pole position was in the wet in Turkey. He qualified on the front row at Monza in the wet. Normally, actually, that's actually when he looks better, one of his strengths. He's not a hopeless racing driver, but he has now started more World Championship Grand Prix than Ayrton Senna did. And he's tied with Jacques Villeneuve, 1997 World Champion. I think we've seen enough. Yeah. We now know that on his day, he's actually not bad, but I completely agree with the point. If if you've got an ambition to go and win world championships, you need to have two proper drivers. And for a different reason, Red Bull suffered from the same. I'm not suggesting that Perez is. It's a different situation for Sergio Perez, but it boils down to the same problem, which is if you're running at the front, you want to win world championships. Unless you've got an enormous car advantage like Red Bull had in 2023, you need two drivers scoring points.
It's funny, isn't it? Mick Schumacher doesn't get the opportunity and has performed probably on a par with Stroll, if not better. Arguably, you can put that out there, but maybe it comes down to who people's parents are. I don't know. Let's leave that one just there and get back.
That's a whole different conversation.
Let's get back to the script. Final question on the Max thing. In the all-time, you said about 5th or 6th in all-time best races in the wet from Max's performance.
No, I wouldn't put it that high. It wouldn't make my 10 at the moment. Right? So in terms of, as I say, they're 100. So it sounds like I'm sort of being a bit poo-pooing it. I'm not. It's out of over 1,100 races in 150 wet races. I'd say it's in the top 20 to 25.
Okay, that's good. That's right.
I mean, I haven't gone that far. My list doesn't extend that far. So maybe I should do one. So but he's now got that. It's a box tick that he didn't have before. I mean, that race in Suzuka a couple of years ago, had that run its full length, that could have been a demolition job. He was pulling away at a rate. So he's kind of been knocking on the door of one of these great wet weather drivers, and now he's got one.
Let's move it on to a team that deserve, I think, a massive round of applause. I'm not going to do it, but Alpine, 2nd and 3rd. I mean, a lovely story between the two drivers as well. Their story has been, we followed it. We know it's been close. They've been close. They've been attacking each other. They've been, and it's just a nice story for Alpine to secure such a humongous points haul that they have now jumped 3 places in the Constructors' Championship and could secure that by the end of the season. How important is it for teams like Alpine to have that, and what does it mean for them moving forward to 2025?
I mean, money is the obvious one. $30 million is the potential earnings from that, which is obviously going to be beneficial. But I think the main aspect is the motivation and the lift that it gives everyone at that team. They've been beaten down so much and for so long, coming off the back of the Renault engine news, which put them further through the floor. This is an opportunity to wipe the slate clean, to enjoy that moment and have that as the benchmark going forward. And I think that is what Oliver Oakes needs to do, is to galvanise the team, bring them all together, working with Flavio Briatore, and move that team forward. It's obviously going to have a different driver lineup next year with Ocon missing and Doohan coming in. And I just think it's a positive step, and they've just got to utilise the momentum from that in the last couple of races in order to prepare for next year.
There are 2 reasons I like the result. One is the engine thing. I mean, I think that is a major decision, actually. Remember, this is effectively the department that brought in turbocharging to F1 and dominated F1 in the 90s, and there's some real history there. And I think there are a lot of people that are a bit hard done by, honestly, with that decision. Putting a Mercedes in the back of an Alpine, I think, it's. So I'm glad they've got that result, but also for the drivers, because I think Ocon and Gasly are a bit underrated, actually, because they've been so close. I think they've been close because they've been maximising what they've got, which hasn't really been enough. I think where they were at the start of the season, actually they have come on quite well, but that was a race for drivers, wasn't it? Yeah. And they got a 2nd and a 3rd, and I think that's they've both taken their opportunities when they've had a chance to get on the podium or win a Grand Prix. They both obviously won a Grand Prix each. I think that's quite nice as well. They both deserve it.
It's been well documented, isn't it, that they clash. I think we'll put it. But after that race, they were both together on camera doing interviews, and there seemed to be a genuine, maybe you can't say affection, but maybe an affection on the fact they both grew up through karting very near to each other in Normandy, and they raced in snow and rain, as they put it. And they both said that, I think Ocon said when he crossed the line and he was just on his cooling down lap, his brain went to those moments. So it's good to see that you have this through story. Yeah,
I mean, they're 2 similar drivers, aren't they, in terms of personality and outlook and aspirations. And I think that it's inevitable that with the frustrations of the team, they're both going to be heightened to that and inevitably clash as a result of that. Not one up and one down, it's both rising up at the same time. So, I guess you could say it was inevitable that they would always clash, and so be it, but they can also enjoy the successes together.
Well, they've been through the mill together,
Yeah.
haven't they, as well? It's a little bit like, fighter pilots. They're trying to kill each other, but then actually afterwards it's like, but you're the only one that understands because we're in the same situation. I wonder if there's a bit of that. I mean, I'm sure they're never going to be best mates, but it was quite a nice moment, and I'm sure they were both sort of taken up in it really as a phew, thank goodness for that,
I'm looking forward to seeing Ocon next year at Haas. I've written about this a few times, and just seeing about his potential and sort of leading that team forward with Behrman, and whether they can carry on with the progress which they've made this year.
I wouldn't want to be Ollie, actually. I do think that that's a really tricky teammate to have as a rookie, because I think Ocon is very good. And, he compared pretty well with Alonso. He's quite difficult as a teammate. Like, he doesn't mind, as we saw at Monaco, he doesn't mind getting stuck into his teammates. I'm not sure that he's going to be the sort of person he's not so experienced in his career to, I'm coming to the end, I'll put my arm around your shoulder, I'll help you out. He's going to be like, I'm going to sort this guy out. And he's got a lot of experience. So, Ollie Behrman, he's obviously done a really good job with his cameo appearances and whatever. Very good driver, but of all the people to be teammates with, Ocon would be fairly near the bottom of my list if I was a rookie.
Do you think that, you mentioned momentum earlier on, how important momentum is, and the season stops in 3 Grand Prix time, there's to pick up and carry on going, but for Gasly and for Ocon, this momentum of getting a podium, reigniting that fire that gives you as a driver or any performer getting a decent result, how will that shape and sculpt their next few Grand Prix and maybe look at 2025?
Well, I think it's vital. On our list is Lewis Hamilton later on, and it's a similar thing in terms of motivation and keeping you going throughout the winter. If you've got this memory in the back of your brain, not so distant memory of a podium and the euphoria that gives you, then it's going to give you added impetus throughout the winter coming into that season. And of course, it's not going to necessarily translate into results, but it is a positive mindset to keep you going throughout that I was going to say long winter, but it's not a long winter anymore.
They'll all be doing their rain dances, won't they, over Christmas? That's exactly what they're doing. And now, let's move on to fan questions. This is something new that we're doing at the moment. This is fan questions. We put on Instagram the opportunity for you to get your questions in, and we're going to do this every Wednesday, so keep your eyes open for this. This is really to get the fans' questions for you to really cause you problems. To put you on the spot.
What an innovation.
Yeah, exactly. So I've 3 questions for you. We're not going to put names to it, but if you have sent your questions in, thank you very much indeed. First up then, this says, after another weekend of struggles and a title this year feeling like a long shot, is Lando Norris world champion material? Kevin?
Yes. I think we've already seen enough to know that he's got the attributes. He is usually quick in the way. He can win races. I think he can do it all. Yes, he's made mistakes, but Lewis Hamilton made mistakes in his first couple of title fights. Max Verstappen did. They kind of almost always do. And if you give the top guys, and let's say there are half a dozen at the moment, a good enough car, they're going to deliver. Those nip and tuck seasons are where the true greats are the ones that make the difference. Is he into that category yet? We've not seen that yet, but I mean, he's still young. He could get there, so yeah, for sure he could win a world championship. Obviously, not this year. It's slipped away from him. I would say that not only because of him. I would say that it does feel like McLaren have been playing for the constructors' championship more than the drivers' championship. I still think that the first lap at Monza was absolutely crazy and shouldn't have happened. Which isn't a criticism of Oscar Piastri, by the way. I think he's just looking out for number 1, or in this case number 2, yes. Or 81. But I think Lando can fight and win a world championship. It just hasn't quite come together for him this year, but he's probably learned a lot, I suspect, from this is his first F1 title fight, let's not forget.
Yeah, absolutely, I totally agree.
That's boring.
Yes, he can win, but ultimately it's not up to him, is it? He should be winning this year. That car's been the quickest for most this year. It depends on what others are doing, and unfortunately he's got Max Verstappen. So you're asking me, can he win a world title? Yes, but it depends on what Max does. In the very similar sense of Andy Murray should have won plenty more trophies than he ever did, but come across a formidable opposition, and I think that's Lando's biggest problem right now.
But I think that the one thing that's lacking from, you could argue is lacking from Lando's game, is the wheel-to-wheel stuff with Max, because they've been too matey and all that sort of thing. But actually I think the way he handled himself in Mexico was quite good. Mm-hmm. This whole front axle thing is a load of old nonsense, and I'm glad they're sorting it out, because it is like so I actually think that he'll be all right with the wheel-to-wheel stuff. He needs to maybe look at a couple of times of what Leclerc's done and how Lewis had to change his game to fight against Max. I'm sure Lando's very self-analytical. He'll go away and go, right, what could I have done better in 2024? And he'll put that into place.
You mentioned McLaren as well. I mean, what was their focus this year? They would have loved to have taken a driver's title, of course, but constructors is where the money is. We know that, and McLaren being where they are this year is incredible from where they were. But the question about, can Lando Norris be a world champion? And you mentioned Verstappen, but Piastri is also in there now, and he's got one decent season under his belt, or will have, so he won't be allowing Lando Norris the freedom to be a number one driver, surely.
I think, I said before that Max was his biggest problem. Perhaps it's Piastri, because if Piastri comes out all firing next year, and again, I've written about this, but he's so steely, cool, he's unplayable in that sense, because you just don't know what he's thinking, what he's going to react to. It's like he's ice cold and there's no emotion, and I think that's really hard. I'd hate to play poker against him, because you could never gauge what he's going to do next, but in actual fact it could be Oscar that's the biggest problem.
He has all the attributes, doesn't he? I think, and I think that's also explains some of his actions against Lando this season. Is he's kind of refusing to be sucked into that David Coulthard, Mick Hacken situation of, I'm helping him out the year before, and then when you do get into championship position, I've already given away the kind of a psychological edge, and he didn't want to do that unless he was explicitly told, you will now do this. And I think that's fair enough from his point of view. He played the game absolutely fair enough. I still think, in terms of beating Lando across the season, there are too many weekends where he's not there. Yeah. So Singapore, for example, when Lando was away, and actually thrashed the field, didn't he?
Yeah.
And really, McLaren needed him between. There was a 20-second gap at the end between Lando and Max. That's where Austin needs to be, and he was still fighting his way through to get up to third. So there are a few weekends where he hasn't pulled it all together, which is what you'd expect for someone in his second season. But it's coming, isn't it? It's just a matter of how soon he gets there and how good the car is when he's ready. Yeah.
Secured some wins. So from one potential champion to a guy who has got 7 of these under his belt, and that's Lewis Hamilton. Another question here. Will Lewis Hamilton succeed at Ferrari given his current dip in form at Mercedes? And I guess the word succeed can be open to debate, but how do you take the word succeed, and what can he do?
I think he will be a success there. What his measure of success obviously is open to interpretation, as you said. I think he'll win. He'll win races. I don't think he'll win a world championship though. I think Lewis is going to go through a much tougher process perhaps than he realises at this stage, working for predominantly UK engineers and definitely UK based teams, to a different culture, different way of thinking. I think that he's going to have to adjust to that, but his difficult years will have motivated him. And I think I mentioned before about having that winning mentality going through. He is motivated probably by some of the failures and the disappointment to hit the ground running and to make sure that he makes an impression in Ferrari from the start. And I think it's going to be quite an interesting relationship between Leclerc and Hamilton, and just how they work together with Fred Vasseur.
I'll be honest, when it was announced in January, I thought it was a good idea for everyone except for Lewis. I thought it was great for Ferrari, made a lot of sense, great coup for Fred Vasseur, brilliant for us.
Yes.
And I thought, but are Ferrari really more likely to win a world championship than Mercedes? And actually now you think, it's looking like a more and more clever move with every passing month, isn't it? Obviously, things haven't been going very well for him for the last few races, but let's not forget, we're still saying the British Grand Prix was brilliantly taken. He stopped Max having another win there because everyone else fell away, and he showed his class. I thought he was brilliant at Spa. Yep. I know he ended up inheriting the win, but actually his performance across the weekend, he still got it in him. Is he past his best? Yes. But is a 95% Lewis Hamilton still better than most of the field? Probably yes. And he's going to bring all that experience. He's won those 7 world championships have all come since Ferrari last won one.
Yes.
So he's going to be he's going to be such a motivating force. And what will happen is Leclerc will out-qualify him in almost every Grand Prix, and then halfway through the race, Leclerc will look in his mirrors and go, how the hell is he here? Very much like Jensen did to Lewis when they were at McLaren. So I think it's a great lineup, and I think he'll be motivated. It'll be a new, fresh start for him. Once he gets over the culture thing, I think that's a fair point. But I think if the car's half decent, which it looks like it's going to be, and Fred will protect him as well, they go back to junior single-seater days, I think Lewis will be quite pumped up for it. he was denied that kind of last hurrah 2022 bounce back from Abu Dhabi thing, wasn't he? By the way the rules changed and Mercedes fell off the pace. So I think he's probably still got something left in him before he's done.
Yeah, I mean, like he's handed his notice in at work, hasn't he? No one really, turns up for work and puts in the extra mile, do they? I don't know. Maybe some people do, but I just think that he's already in that mindset of I'm already leaving this team.
Even if it's a subconscious thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe the conspiracy theories of Mercedes are giving him second. Like, that's not how it works, and they're too professional a team.
And he's still wanting to deliver of a race weekend. I'm not being.
And also, what's the point in Mercedes doing that with the constructors?
Makes no sense.
What's the point? Why would you take away a tool for one of your drivers when they're still scoring points for you?
And we've got to remember that George Russell is bloody good. You would expect the guys 10, 12 years younger to be quicker over one lap. I think there've been enough times this season where Lewis has still been quicker in the races. Okay, the last couple haven't gone his way. Although he kept plugging away, didn't he? He didn't park it up at the weekend. He still plugged away and he still beat Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. It was bad, but it wasn't. It wasn't that horrendous.
So success is all how you interpret it, as you say, and success could be Lewis assisting Ferrari to get themselves forward and to assist Leclerc in a title challenge as opposed to him going for a title.
Yeah, perfect for Ferrari, perfect signing, as you mentioned there, Kev. Like, I think it's absolutely a man that they need to drive them forward.
Yeah. And that's not Christian Carlos Sainz, by the way. I think it's also like, if you're going to, Lewis is probably one of the few people on the grid who is an upgrade as a whole package over Sainz.
Final question then. After another poor weekend, poor Sergio Perez. After another poor weekend, I don't know why I'm saying poor Sergio Perez. After another poor weekend from Sergio Perez, who is most likely to partner Max Verstappen in 2025? And it's the last debate for the seats, really. Is it RB and Red Bull? What's going to go on there? There's a seat available maybe in each car?
Well, I think it's Liam Lawson. Based at this moment in time, I think, I've been hugely impressed with him. The 3 races that he's come in, 9th in Austin, 9th last weekend in Sao Paulo. Yes, he had a bit of a miserable, scrappy Mexico Grand Prix where he obviously clashed with Perez, and I think had it not been any other driver, he would have been high-fived in the Red Bull garage for getting his elbows out, and well done you. But he's showing that he's consistent. Okay, it's 9th, but he's consistent. But he's also not a shrinking violet. Alonso was calling him out, and he stood his ground against Alonso. And again, that sort of rebuttal would be applauded by Red Bull. The fact that he's not going to be pushed over by a much more experienced campaigner. That's the sort of driver that they need. I think the biggest factor behind it is the fact that he's liked by the Verstappens. Max likes him and Jos likes him. Jos was talking at the weekend about how good Liam Lawson's doing. And of course, the modus operandi at Red Bull is to preserve Verstappen and just to keep the harmony there, because if you've got him in the team, he'll deliver you wins and possibly championships. You just need a steady Eddie swooping up and picking up all the remaining points, of which, you've got to say that Lawson's capable of doing, based on the evidence that we've seen so far.
But will Liam Lawson rock the boat? Will he settle for being the wingman to Verstappen like Perez has been?
I'm not yet convinced that he's good enough to rock Max's boat, really.
Sure.
I don't think we've quite seen that, but I mean, there is a chasm. Like, the gap between the two of them is enormous, and I'm sure that Lawson will be able to slot into that. But I think the Verstappen family point is the crucial one, because to me, if you take that out of it, the moment that Hamilton signs the Ferrari deal, Carlos, surely you give Sainz a ring, don't you? But of course they go back to Toro Rosso, where Sainz Sainz has had some pretty tough teammates, hasn't he? He came in with Verstappen, he's been teammates with Lando, and he's had Leclerc, arguably the fastest ever. And he's not looked bad against any of them. Like, he's a proper Grand Prix driver, and he's by far, I would say, at that point in the season, he was the best driver they had on the market. And the fact that they didn't basically go, Sainz, you're in the second car, has surely got to be because of the Verstappen factor, and therefore I can't see anyone other than Lawson. I don't know how they feel about Colapinto.
I mean, he's low maintenance, isn't he, Liam Lawson? As far as I'm aware, management structure all seems to be taken care of by Red Bull. There's no external influences. And you mentioned the Colapinto. I think that Christian Horner went into the Williams motorhome, didn't he, over the weekend, and I think that started tongues wagging. But I guess he's doing his due diligence in finding out his worth. What do Williams want in exchange? Is it a loan deal? Is it actually to sign him on a permanent basis?
And it'd be far be anyway, wouldn't it, if you moved Liam up? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, with that in mind then, I mean, the question is all about Sergio Perez and will he be partnering Max Verstappen in 2025, but will Sergio Perez be on the grid in 2025?
Don't think so.
I mean, we've seen enough, haven't we? Like, he's had a long career. He's won some races. The sad thing is, he's a better driver than he looked this year.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would deny that. But he has had a top drive for too long. I think we've known that he hasn't really been able to deliver quite. He earned his right as a good midfield driver. Yeah. He earned his shot in a top car, and he wasn't quite a top driver. And he's won some races, earned lots of money, and now he can. If he wants to carry on racing, I'm sure there are many categories and many teams that would love to have an ex-F1 driver in there.
So who's going to partner Tsunoda?
Not sure.
No idea.
Yep.
Any thoughts?
I still think it's too young for the Red Bull juniors.
They're not big on Hadjar, are they? And Arvid Lindblad's only getting into F2, so well, maybe that's why they are having the Colapinto chat.
But this is it.
They need someone, don't they?
But I don't think that they'd be interested in the loan deal. They would want him permanently.
So Perez maybe not even on the grid in 2025. It would be the end of an era, a great era, not sure, but an era nonetheless. Look, gents, thank you very much indeed, and thank you as well for watching. This concludes our look back at Brazil and our fans Q&A. This is something we're going to be doing every single week from now on. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our content, and keep your eyes out on Instagram and on Twitter, X as it's now known, of course, for our posts early in the week where you can get your questions in. Kevin loves that. You can get your questions in. Keep your eyes out by searching at Autosport and you'll find it there. Get those questions into us and we'll put our questions, or your questions even, to the journalists every single Wednesday. As always, thanks very much for watching and we'll see you next time.